son. Where'd you find this?
Buckle up, buttercups. It's time to get down to business. Oh, yeah. It's the Totally Legitimate Business Podcast. Totally legit. Now, here are your hosts, Clint and James.
Hello. Welcome back to the Totally Legitimate Business Podcast. We are your hosts, Clint and James. Let's get down to business. Clint, buddy, how you doing?
Yeehaw, brother. I'm out here riding the rodeo of life. Just back-to-back shows all weekend and stuff. So
yeah, you've been going hard.
Dude, yeah, I'm trying to go, I've got to go out of town for work next week, and then I'm going to take a little trip out to the mountains.
Oh, a little reset, a little breather.
Yeah, I'm going to turn my fucking phone off for 2 days. It's going to be great.
Nice.
But yeah, trying to get a bunch of stuff done before then. So, but yeah, it's been a great week. I ended up getting tickets to that band Botch last night.
Oh yeah, dude, I saw you post about it. How was that show? Looked like a riot.
Fucking wild. For a band that hasn't played a show in 20 years or something, since we were in high school, they just kicked ass.
That's awesome.
It was so intense and so great. So yeah, super solid. If anybody has a chance to go see that, because I think they just announced other dates, go do that shit. It's worth the ticket fees for sure.
Sick, dude.
What about you?
There's two other things going on tonight. Why don't you just give those a quick little shout out?
Oh yeah, dude. Yeah, we're still just going with the gauntlet. I'm gonna go work merch for the Mathcore Index presents Nurser Self-Deprecator. We put out their records and stuff, so that'll be a fun little get together. It's at a DIY spot out here. And then right after that, I'm going to go see Crazy Town and the Cottonmouth Kings.
You were talking, research,
anthropological purposes. Research
purposes, of course. Yeah. You were talking about that. I mean, what are you most stoked for?
Well, I'm bummed I'm going to miss all the Juggalo rapper openers because I saw there was 5 names on the bill before they go, and I was like, oh, they're all playing 2 songs apiece.
Yeah, definitely.
But yeah, dude, the people watching, and I think just the blatant disregard for marijuana smoking inside a venue that I know gets people do that is
for sure,
because there's no way. It's just a bunch of
it's going to be complete disrespect. Yeah. I wouldn't be surprised if somebody has their dab rig. They're going full 6-foot bong. Acrylic shit.
I will take pictures.
Yeah, it'd be hilarious.
Stealth.
Well, that's wonderful. Sounds like you're really just packing your time.
Yeah, baby. What you got going on?
Man, nothing much. I am doing as little as possible. I mean, I have been doing a fair amount of running around, just random odds and ends things, but trying to button up the projects, right? Got a lot of projects, got started in COVID or maybe even a little before or after COVID. And I'm just trying to go through the process of working my way down the checklist and getting them done, buttoning them up.
A little TCB. Take care of business.
A little TCB. I usually find there's a lull in just productivity between really the rest of winter. The rest of winter, people are really kind of in hibernate mode still, and then spring and summer. I want to be ready for spring and summer. By spring and summer, I don't want to have to be worrying about doing all the shit that I could be doing right now. So,
dude, we never have a problem blooming in spring, the beautiful foliage that surrounds us.
Yeah, we're each our own unique little flowers.
Little flowers. Speaking of little flowers.
Yeah, speaking of unique little flowers.
Unique little flowers that always smell fragrant and nice. Good color scheme. We've got a guest today.
It is it's with great pleasure that we introduce to the world our buddy of a decade now, more than a decade.
It's something like that. Yeah, at least.
It's irrelevant. Erik Henkelman. He's here.
Guys,
I could have played you the Curb music, but
no, he deserves applause.
I deserve an applause. Thank you.
But he would have loved the Curb music. Just saying. You do love that show. Erik, buddy, how you doing? How you been? What's going on?
I'm doing great. I just realized Clint's going to see Crazy Town, and that's fucking awesome.
I'll take a picture with Shifty Shell Shock for you. That's their singer.
I did not expect to hear that, so that was really good.
You gotta change it up a little bit.
Yeah. Respect. I get that.
A couple episodes ago, we had our buddy Dave Gashaw on, who's also from the Middle Tennessee area. And one of his bands opened for Crazy Town at a show in Colorado, but he had to work the next day, so he couldn't see it.
So
He missed out on a show of a lifetime, I'm sure.
I'll have a detailed report for everybody tomorrow.
Good,
Sick.
please.
Once the hangover and meth binge wears off. Anyways, enough about Crazy Town, sugar baby. Now, Eric, we've known you for what? Yeah, well over a decade. College days. I remember being in a hot tub with you, awkwardly stoned on marijuana at probably the age of 19 or 20, maybe.
Sounds about right.
Yeah.
It's very nice.
Yeah.
And you've come a long way. You've come a long way since then.
I have. I've come a long way. I will say that was the best bachelor pad I've ever had, though. I had a fucking hot tub.
Dude. So in the college days, Eric rented out a portion of a house kind of that was apartmented off. And I came over one day to work on school project or something. So that's what we'll say. We'll call it a school project.
Yeah.
And then he was like, yo, you want to hang out for a little bit? And I was like, yeah, sure. And then he was like, yeah, I just got the hot tub in the back. And I was like, all right, dude. It was this sick backyard.
Well, then.
The lights hanging up over it and everything. And I was like, my guy, what?
Yeah.
Meanwhile, I'm living in a cinder block fucking, cage. It was they sold it as a dorm, but it was really made by the same people who make prison cells.
We could push the walls out.
Yeah.
We could push the walls out and see outside. We were on the 5th floor.
Wow, that's amazing.
But you've come a long way. Now you're in beautiful. Are you still in Brooklyn?
Still in Brooklyn. Only place.
Baby.
Yeah, Brooklyn, baby.
Yeah, you and James aren't neighbors anymore, are you?
Do what?
You and James aren't neighbors anymore, are you?
Sadly, no.
No.
That made it nice and easy because whenever I come to visit, I could just be like, Eric's really busy, but he's going to go get coffee with us real quick. I was like,
yeah. It was easy. And then this fucker had to decide to live in a better place,
He had to settle down with a partner and get a nice spot.
Oh gosh, he wanted to get rid of cinder block walls. Jesus.
I had to get an apartment with an actual bathroom,
with a sink.
Yeah. I can not live with a sociopath.
Oh man, that was quite an experience.
No comment.
Seriously. It's Clint experienced it. Clint knows. It's fucking crazy. Speaking of sociopaths, I see you have Eileen Warnos on your shirt. You want to unpack that a little bit?
Oh yeah. I mean, it's just
I love that shirt.
I mean, let's see. So I make t-shirts randomly whenever I feel like it. And this is one that I've made. And I remember the climate walking around before. This was, pre-Trump and everything. It was like, oh, you could kind of wear it. Now I just feel weird, wearing this out in Brooklyn. I get some strange looks.
Probably going to cause some problems. Yeah.
The beautiful part about New York City, though, is that no matter what you do, it's not the weirdest thing anybody's seen.
Exactly. It's okay because someone's ultra sensitive about this. And I'm like, no, I'm supporting women. This is the first female serial killer. We need to do it.
Yeah.
You do always have great shirts. Do you make them do you just make one-offs for yourself?
Yeah, I do one-offs. And then I finally, after talking to James for so long, he's like, you need to just start selling these shirts. And so I just printed off a bunch. And then COVID hit. So then I just got stuck with a shit ton of shirts and I never got to sell them. But yeah, because I would just make designs I just be getting stoned and I think something's funny. And so I just decided to make a shirt.
Hey, I think if more people just acted on that feeling that we'd have a lot cooler shit hanging out.
It's honestly the beginning of all great art when you really boil it down.
It's well, I got stoned and I thought it was hilarious. So
I was tripping my ass off and I thought this thought that I'd never thought before.
It's great. My favorite stoned moment shirt of making it was I was watching the OJ documentary, and he's going down the 405. And I was like, oh, that'd be a great graphic. And then I was like, what can I put there? I want it to be funny. I was like, oh man, Pursuit of Happiness. That's fucking. It was.
And if I hear that song one more time, I'm gonna blow my apartment building up. Like, it's like, how many TV shows have used that song now for like, or like movie trailers?
Which song?
Oh, the Pursuit of Happiness. The I'm on the pursuit of happiness. It's like every time I see it, I'm like, oh, trailer, I'll check this out. And that song comes on, I'm like, fucking done. But on a shirt with the OJ Bronco on it.
Mm-hmm. And it's basically just like the motorcade of cops, just guiding him to his mom's house.
What a life!
I know. It's American Hero right there.
It's so funny because like when we knew each other in Tennessee, or even when we first started hanging out when I moved to New York, I didn't realize, like, we always bonded over music. Like that was like a no-brainer. Like we would just be into talking about whatever we were into musically at that moment. But I remember after hanging out with you and Chris and JT, starting to learn like everyone has their things, right? Everyone has the things that they're into. And Erik has a very special set of skills. He knows about all the sports cons and all the sports scams and any crime associated with somebody who at one point was in sports. And it was really funny because I'm not a sports person. And I didn't even understand there were all these conspiracies I could appreciate. And I just knew a little bit about sports.
Fun part about that too is I've never seen Erik with any kind of sporting equipment in his hands.
Hey, you box now. He boxes now. He boxes now.
I'm gonna shut up then.
No, that'll
fuck you up.
Could it be more accurate? But yeah, no. Now I'm boxing because I fucking hate running. But that's all right.
That's a good trade-off.
Yeah, that's good. But yeah, man, there's some crazy people in sports, and because of the multi-billion-dollar sports industry, they love to just sweep shit under the rug, and it's wild.
Wild. What are your thoughts? I know there's been a mainstream thought, if I've heard of it, because I loosely pay attention to sports just to make conversation with the small talk with people at like bars or whatever, like. I've seen a lot of things that there's a lot of conspiracies lately that like whole organizations are fixed. Like, like I saw a bunch of stuff about the Super Bowl being like because of all the calls and like the people slipping and, maybe somebody tipped one team off because he was their former like field manager, like field keeper or whatever, greenskeeper.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Mm-hmm. Like, what are your thoughts on that? Do you think any of that is like actually like viable, or do you think it's just a bunch of kooks pissed because their team lost?
I think it's both, honestly, because it's like it's never going to be a perfect game. I think someone is always going to have an advantage to take, or like get a leg up on somebody. So I can see them swaying calls and doing things a certain way. But also, like, I just don't see how, like, I mean, that's a fucking giant organization for everybody to have be like, oh yeah, there's a script and nobody knows except we have to tell everybody, but nobody knows. It's right. I don't know. I just don't. It seems way too difficult just because like there's so much within football, like basketball. That shit is rigged. Like that, I believe that shit is rigged because I think basketball is easier to control because there's less people on
there's half the players on the court, right?
Yeah, there's nobody. Yeah, so it's just less people. Like I don't. It's
and even just with calls and fouls, like you can kind of control a game or who has access to making points. Like if you've got the ref, you can own that fucking game. Really, you can way more than you could football. I see what you're saying for sure.
Right, and so that's the thing. So, done my research on mafia families like rigging games. They rig basketball because it's easy, because there's less people involved. Like James was saying, you just get the ref under you and you're good.
Good.
You're good. Football, it would just be way too difficult. And so I would be pretty sad if that happened, because then I'd be like, well, I'm playing fantasy football for fucking nothing, and I would just get so fucking upset.
It's all a lie.
It's
right?
all a sham. You can do DraftKings on WWE wrestling now. That's
I know.
it's like knowingly predetermined. It's like, what a fucking scam that is.
Yeah,
That
totally.
is nuts that you can do that. That is nuts.
Good. Yeah.
Because that is literally scripted entertainment.
We say predetermined, but yes.
Yeah.
Predetermined
All right.
outcome, but it's not fake.
Yeah, whatever copium you want to smoke today, buddy. All right.
Either way, dude. Yeah, you can bet on anything now. Remember how like strict gambling used to be, like, even like when we were kids, probably that, like however many years ago. But like, I feel like in the last like 10 years, everybody's been like, nah, fuck it, that's tax money for the state.
Yeah,
so like
fuck it.
everybody's so loose about it now.
Yeah.
They just everybody gave up. I completely agree. Everybody gave up. It's like, there's money to be made. Let's do it. We're all doing it anyways.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, that's the thing. It's like, why is that a problem? I would much rather gambling be taking place in a fucking casino because I know what to expect instead of some back alley where I'm going to get fucking stabbed if I win too much.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I whatever. I'll take the fucking casinos. And if we can take the goddamn money and I mean, not to say most of that, a lot of that casino money, I'm sure ends up in the pockets of the politicians that fucking passed the legislation to allow the casino to be there in the first place. But
Right.
Whatever. I'm sure some of it trickles back to roads or schools or whatever. Here's a question, Eric. Which came first, chicken or the egg here? Did you start interested in the mafia and then find out that the mafia was rigging games and that's what brought you to sports scandals? Or were you looking into sports scandals and see the mafia connection and then become interested in the mafia? How did... I know you're interested in both of those things, but which one is the genesis of the other?
It was the former.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just heard about, watching like a mafia documentary or something and like, and they did Henry Hill like rigged some game, like some college game. And I was like, what? And so I just like researched that and I was like, oh shit, they actually did do that.
Yeah.
They controlled it. They were the first ones to do like point shaving. And then also, watching The Sopranos.
Yeah.
I hear like what they say, like he's like, oh, he was back in 66. He was the first one to do point shaving. So I'm like, is this accurate? And I look it up and like, oh, that's accurate. It's fucking accurate. Which is why it's the best show ever made.
Wait, was The Sopranos a real life documentary, or was it script, or was it predetermined?
Oh my fucking God. Well, I mean, the real crime family in New Jersey that they were basing it off of, they thought it was scripted. There's like wiretaps of them talking about The Sopranos and being like, how do they know this shit? How are they making fun of us like this?
It's hilarious hearing those fucking audio tapes.
Yeah, it's real. Like, yeah, they are one, and they sound like they're from The Sopranos. Like, it sounds like it's a phone call from the fucking show.
It's hilarious. Really great. It's really great. But yeah, that's how I got into it. Just being like a mafia head and going into that. And I can't believe like all this shit is happening. Like they rigged, the World Series in like 1918.
Bro, nothing is sacred.
Yeah.
Nothing is sacred. Nothing is sacred. And I had always been aware of it just because I've always been interested in the connection and influence and power that the mafia had. I was always aware of it, but I really, until you started telling me about all the good ones, I had no idea the scope. And it's literally every decade, probably every sport at this point. And that's not even including all the other sports scandals that occur in those sports. That's not the mafia. It's just other people trying to fucking get an edge on their competition in some, shiesty way.
Yeah. It's like, we've talked about it, like the referee who rigged games for the NBA, Tim Donaghy. The only reason they found out about that is because the FBI had a wiretap on like the Colombo crime family, and they were talking about how they had a zebra in their pocket. And then they're like, oh, what does this mean? Oh shit, someone's actually doing this. Yeah.
It's fucking crazy, dude. It never ceases to amaze me. And honestly, like the mafia just in general, it's never ceased to amaze me. We don't understand because we weren't alive for most of it.
Right.
But they ran this country.
Yeah. Yeah.
They ran every major city, Like they ran this. A lot of trade unions. They ran this fucking country.
That's what America's all about. They saw an opportunity, and they
Capitalism,
pulled themselves
baby.
up by their Italian leather shoes.
Yeah.
And they made it happen. Okay. And they got that check. They secured the bag.
Why not? They sure did. They sure did. So, since we're on this subject, this might be the best possible, the smoothest, the gentlest segue. Not a violent ramming of a new idea into another idea. I've
got this one.
Yeah. Oh, cool. Thanks.
You want a smooth segue?
Yeah, sure.
We're talking about all these sports scandals and everything. But Eric, you mentioned earlier that you think the NFL might not be rigged because it's too many people, and it got me thinking. How could such a large organization be able to keep secrets from so many people? James, continue.
Well, thank you for that flawless layup.
That was a slam dunk, buddy.
That was very well done. It was very well thought out.
It was excellent. It was excellent. This story is fucked. So I've been interested in this for a minute now, but really have I can't even wrap my head around the depth, the scope, and complexity of this situation. So this story really it kind of starts with the death of this guy named Roberto Calvi. And Roberto Calvi was a banker for a bank called Banco Ambrosiano in Italy. And his death starts it doesn't really start the uncovering, but it's like one of the
it was unusual, and it was the uncovering, because we're just like, okay, this is very suspect. Who is this guy?
Something's going on here.
Let's see what's happening. And
But so anyways, June 18, 1982, Roberto Calvi is found hanging below Blackfriars Bridge in London. Now, there's some significance to that, but we'll come back to it. This story spins so wildly out of control so fast. If it starts to get weird, just fucking stop. Clint, really, this is going to be you, because Eric has notes. I have some notes. So if there's something we should stop and unpack, just fucking shout it out. But the same thing for you, Eric. If there's something that I breeze over that needs to be unpacked, just shout it out. So they find him under this bridge. He's still wearing his really expensive suit, his Rolex. He's got about $1,400 in 4 different currencies. He's got a fake passport, and he's got a bunch of rocks in his pocket. And it's like how he got under the bridge is really weird, because there was like scaffolding. It would have been like really precarious. He's just hanging from the bridge, and it doesn't really look like he climbed down the side of this bridge and on this rusty scaffolding and hung himself. It looks like his body was just...
The suicide would be highly unlikely due to the circumstances.
They reenacted it, and there's like with his, nice fucking shoes that he had on. They were like, oh, in order to do this, he'd have to climb on this rusty pipe that James mentioned, and there's no rust on his shoes.
Or his suit. His suit was clean.
It just, as this dude was dead and then just hung up on the bridge.
So they figure out this guy, Roberto Calvi, who at that moment he was kind of on the run. His name was Roberto Calvi, but his nickname was God's Banker. And he was called God's Banker because he had a very close working relationship with one of the Vatican banks, the Vatican Bank of Charitable Works, and other Italian and really world elites, but all over the place. This guy was like big money, big fucking money. But 1981, a year before his death, is when shit really starts to kind of unwind. At one point, he's wanted for fraud, embezzlement, and money laundering because of shisty business dealings he was doing with his bank and the Vatican's money and the mafia's money. But again, we'll get into that in a minute. The police start investigating these crimes, and they come across this guy named Licio Gelli. And Licio Gelli is this big Italian. He's a mattress mogul. He's he's been a prominent name in Italy for a very long time, but his history is kind of fucky.
Yeah, he was really good friends with Goering.
He was a fascist, like a fascist.
Yeah, he was like, I like Goering and what he does,
and during World War II, he's tight with Mussolini. We'll get into this again, but after World War II, he flees to Argentina with a lot of the other Nazis on the rat lines, and he's like buddy with a lot of the South American dictators of the time, fascist dictators. Anyways, 1981, Jelly's house gets raided, and the police discover a list of names to an ultra secret clandestine Masonic lodge called Propaganda Due. And P2, and Jelly was in charge. This is one of the oldest lodges in it. Well, it evolved from Propaganda 1 lodge, but it's a very old, like 1800s old Masonic lodge and lineage. And the membership in that specific lodge in P2 included some of the highest possible ranking officials in the Italian military, the Italian government, Catholic Church, and leaders of industry. In fact, there are a bunch of really clever nods to this story because it came out right around the time that they were working on the movie for Godfather 3. If you watch Godfather 3, there's a lot of subtle nods to a lot of this shit that was happening. But, kind of to your point, Clint, this is a scenario where there's straight up a shadow government. In fact, a lot of people in Italy called P2, the Masonic Lodge, they called it the shadow government because that's like the people that were in this specific lodge were the most powerful of the most powerful.
Well, yeah,
basically
you've got the church and the state and the bankers and the industry
all meeting in a secret club,
talking about what they're going to do.
Yeah. So for
also,
sure.
do you want to hear something messed up? Never seen Godfather 2 or 3.
I've never seen the third one, so that's okay.
Sorry, sidetracked.
Shadow. It's fine. As long as you saw Godfather 1, that's all that really matters.
You should kill yourself for not seeing Godfather 2. But
yeah, dude, Godfather 2, honestly, that is some of the most it's better. There are more iconic scenes in Godfather 2, in my opinion, than there are in Godfather 1.
Eric,
like Godfather 2 is just...
I really don't like that you just told me to kill myself, so I'm going to go find a really inconvenient bridge, and you're gonna see it, and there's going to be rocks in my pocket, and your name's...
Yeah, no, buddy, he'll help you. He'll help you do that.
Yeah, oh, God.
You're not going to do it by yourself. We just said that. It's going to require some assistance, so FC didn't kill himself. So anyways, 1800s. Let's do a little backstory here. Masonry kind of emerges from a number of different places, but really it emerges from stone working guilds, like actual masons, bricklayers, stoneworkers. That's a trade guild that goes back hundreds, like most of recorded human history for what we know. And over time, it just became a little more organized and then kind of becomes a social club as it grew in popularity and included people who are not just like actual stone workers. Propaganda 1, the original lodge, is formed in 1876 and operates until 1925 until Mussolini comes into power. Mussolini did not like Masonic lodges, and the Vatican, the Catholic Church, never liked Masonry. They didn't like anything that wasn't Catholic, right? And Catholic Church has a couple secretive orders, Knights of Malta. There's a couple other like similar clubs that you can belong to, but they never liked Masonry because it wasn't, the Catholics couldn't control it, right? It was a thing that was operating separately. During the war, it kind of becomes vilified in Italy. Very difficult to be a Mason there. But basically, it comes back after World War II, but needs to be completely rebuilt. And it's around this time that Licio Gelli, whose nickname was also King Cobra, which is fucking sick.
It's a sick name.
Yeah, it's cool.
He takes control of P2 in the 60s, and he just turns it into this fucking powerhouse, like literally a whole other estate within a state within a state.
Now, didn't Jelly get the funding to do that from Mussolini?
To do what?
P2? To start P2.
I don't know. If you have found that somewhere, it wouldn't surprise me. This guy was tight, and he was tight with a lot of the very powerful people at that point.
Yeah, I want to say that Jelly got some funding from Mussolini, and he somehow just funneled money, after World War II, and just kept it, and that's how P2 was able to start.
Yeah, and really, again, it was so powerful that people literally called it a parallel government or shadow government, and they really have a hand. This is where it gets crazy. So, like the whole concept of a shadow government, everyone always talks about it and jokes about it, but this is a situation in history where not only was it real, but it was real and nobody had any fucking idea what was going on, and these. It's crazy. Like crime, government, church, all fucking centers of power were members of this club, and they were just making Italy, and it, to large part, other places throughout the world that they could exert their control. Anyways, 1943, Licio Gelli, he's a huge fascist. And when Italy renounces its alliance with the Axis powers, Gelli helped form the Republic of Salo, which was a German puppet state in northern Italy. Maybe that was what Mussolini gave him money for.
Maybe that's okay. Okay.
But anyways,
yeah,
because at the end of the war, he flees to Argentina to avoid prosecutions for, his fascist crimes. There he befriends Juan Perón, the dictator of Argentina. And it's speculated by some at this time he started working with the CIA. Now, there was a lot of concern, we've talked about this on a few other episodes, in South America post-World War II, because there were a lot of leaders in South America that were straight up fascist, Nazi 100% sympathizers. Nazis had already kind of gotten real buddy-buddy with a lot of the dictators in South America, and that was super alarming to America for a number of reasons. So the CIA was down there doing a whole bunch of shit, disrupting governments, assassinations, all sorts of crazy shit, trying to find some of the Nazis that escaped to places like Bariloche and Chile. And so there's no like hard connection. The CIA's never said they did this, but it's thought that around this time he came into contact with CIA. So finally, after years of exile, he returns to Italy and starts a mattress company. In 1962, he officially becomes a Freemason and begins rising through the ranks. In 1968, he's named head of Propaganda 1, which then later evolves into Propaganda 2. And during 1968 to 1988 in Italy, there was this thing called the Years of Lead. And it was basically just like political upheaval, mafia killing government trying to hunt down the mafia, terrorist attacks from all these like fascist right or left wing groups.
Just all of a sudden, all these important people just end up getting capped.
No, dude, seriously, this list is ridiculous.
It's insane. Yeah.
But it's just a combination of
400 something assassinations, I think.
It's serious. Like there's an occasional mafia assassination or political assassination in Italy now with the mafia, but this was like at the peak and it was crazy. It was like fucking Fallujah, war in the streets, bombs going off, is crazy shit. And that was a tumultuous time too, because it was also during the Cold War. So like, and Italy is in a very precarious location right next to fucking Russia. And there's a lot of, with the upheaval in the government, there's a lot of concern that maybe socialism and socialists and Russian communism would infiltrate and take power in Italy, which again was kind of the guys in P2 who were very fascist. They did not want communism. They wanted a far right dictatorship. They did not want communism or socialists or anything. So they were fascists in this secret club, and they were literally advancing the agenda of fascism and against liberalism in Italy for a very long period of time.
Years.
In 1969, there was a bank bombing that killed 8 and wounded 80. 80 anarchists were arrested. One falls out of a window and dies. The police officer that interrogated him is assassinated in retaliation. And then the attack was actually carried out by Ordio Nuevo, or the New Order, which was a far-right neo-fascist group. The two men that get arrested for the crime, Franco Freda and Giovanni Vendura, the case doesn't really get resolved until 2004, but it's because there was some obstruction of justice on behalf of General Giandelio Maletti, who destroyed evidence implicating the two in the crime. The general was a member of P2. So you see what I'm saying? Like, this was like at every fucking level. Police officers, judges, politicians, like whatever would advance their agenda, they would literally pull the strings of the government to make it so. It's crazy.
It would be easy at any point. He was like, okay, here's the plan. Here's what we're going to do. And then you've got multiple options to pull the lever.
100%. 100%.
Now, you said 80 anarchists were arrested. Was that you think that was like a farce almost, where like they were basically just they were accusing people of being anarchists to,
I think so,
them and then just get
well, I mean, with like any country anywhere, after a terrorist attack and the people there get afraid, they're going to round up anyone who they can, blame as the terrorist, or anyone that's associated with the ideas of the terrorists. They're going to get rounded up.
Yeah, it's very similar to January 6th, and then just blaming Antifa. Like, yeah, that's what the New Order was just Antifa.
Yeah,
without masks,
or maybe with masks. I don't know. But so kind of going back to that a little bit, there's this other guy named Julio Borghese, and he's a member of a prominent Italian family. He fought for the fascists in the Republic of Salo. He's a decorated war veteran, and even though he was like a fascist, after the war in Italy, people kind of think highly of him. He's a war hero in the country. Internationally, maybe people don't think about him that way, but there he was. Then he goes into politics and gains the nickname the Black Prince, also fucking righteous. But it's due to his far right views, which is not righteous at all. Yeah. He hated the growing sentiment of liberalism in Italy and decided to plan a coup and install himself as president. So the plan consisted of kidnapping the current president, killing the head of police, taking the Ministry of Defense, and enlisting a few different groups to aid in these means. The New Order, the Mafia, and P2. P2 members were actually responsible for kidnapping the acting president. Mm-hmm. Now, they didn't do this because the night before the coup, Borghese called the whole thing off, and the reason for calling the coup off was that it was raining.
It rained.
Which has got to be like the most mob, like leader of a fucking criminal organization. Nah, it's raining. Not going to do it tonight. Nah. But unfortunately, because this was the 80s and people didn't have cell phones and text messages, by the time he decided to shut the whole thing down, some people had already started the coup. But it didn't really get all the way through. Anyways, when it comes down to prosecute people for the crimes that were committed, evidence linking P2 magically gets destroyed by the Secret Service.
Dude, that's so. Imagine how embarrassed you'd be if you were one of the people that started doing your portion, just not knowing what's going on. This goes back to what I say all the time.
I thought we were cooing here. I thought we were doing a coup. I thought we were cooing.
Just communicate with me, okay?
Well, that's the problem, is that they all had communicated. The problem was that when he didn't have the contingency for if he needed to communicate a cancellation, right? In the 80s, they were all like, all right, we're going to synchronize our watches. All right, we're starting the coup at 7 o'clock. Going to get some dinner, but starting the coup at 7. And then at 6:58, he's like, nah, it's raining, but he doesn't have time. People, and plus, different manufacturers of watches, the clocks aren't in sync. It's just it was a simpler time. It was a simpler time. But anyways, after this, the Italian Masonic leadership, this whole time up until this point, it was an actual chartered Masonic lodge. And by that, I mean, in order to have an actual official charter as a Masonic lodge, you need to get approval from the Grand Lodge, depending on what you're doing, the Grand Lodge of France or the Grand Lodge of England. And that can be reviewed or revoked at any moment, depending on the behavior of the members of your lodge. And this was like another thing that their lodge got implicated in, like a big time political scandal. So Grand Lodge revokes their membership. So now it's what we call a clandestine lodge, which means it's a lodge that's operating outside the normal rules of Freemasonry. And basically because the way Freemasonry is now, most places don't view it as a secret society. It's viewed as a legitimate organization. It's on tax documents. It get taxes. Like there's maybe it doesn't pay taxes, but there's like charitable contributions. It's on the books. It doesn't operate completely off the books. There's some kind of transactional record with Freemasonry. But that's what makes it a legitimate thing, like a legitimate business or operation, right?
Legitimate business?
Yeah, totally legitimate business, right? But after they get their charter revoked, they officially become a secret society, which was illegal in Italy. For this exact reason. So
it's officially a secret.
Yeah. Liccio Gelli is also allegedly involved in the kidnapping and murder of an Italian politician, Aldo Moro, who is the former Italian prime minister. March 15, 1978, ultra left-wing terrorist group, the Red Brigade, killed his guards and kidnapped him. While a captive, the RB, the Red Brigade, offered to release him in exchange for the release of an imprisoned Red Brigade member, but the government declined, and they found Aldo Moro's body in the trunk of a car.
He was kidnapped for like 50 days, or he was captive.
Yeah. They had him for a very long time. There was a legitimate negotiation, but then they found his body in the trunk of a car. Mm-hmm. Journalist Carmine Piccarelli wrote an article implicating P2 members in the assassination, and then later was murdered in retaliation. The summer of 1980, a suitcase bomb explodes at a Bologna train station, kills 85 people and injures 200. 2 members of a far-right group were charged with the attack, but it turns out they were framed by the SIS-MI, which is the Italian equivalent of the CIA, probably on the order of someone in P2. During the Cold War, tensions were obviously very high, and Italy faced a growing leftist presence. And leftist politicians were gaining traction in Italian politics. And this is allegedly when the CIA gets involved again, like we were talking about before. The CIA just did not want communism spreading in Europe. So they were literally teaming up with anyone to stop the spread of communism, and then just sorting it out later. It's also how we got involved with all of our friends in the Middle East too. When the CIA gets involved, and this is kind of in line with the CIA supporting anti-leftist groups all over the world, it's actually part of an operation called Operation Gladio. This is like a real thing. It's not just some fucking fringe shit. It's like a real thing that was... They didn't want communism spreading in Europe, and they were very, very scared about that, and they were literally willing to do anything. Nobody was safe. If they thought killing you would help stop the spread of communism, they'd have no problem fucking killing you. Operation Gladio was a plan to have anti-communist forces ready if communists began to forcibly assert their control anywhere in Europe. But as with any government operation, it devolved into senseless violence and loss of innocent life in the name of democracy. Many of these events during the years of lead were a direct result of Operation Gladio. There was effectively an underground proxy war between the KGB and the CIA all over Europe. And it started immediately after World War II, even when Russia and the States were saying, like, we're friends, we beat this enemy, they immediately started spying on each other and trying to undermine the other, that they knew that the new war was going to be with Russia. Anyways, P2, being natural allies to CIA and their cause, received support and funding from the CIA. So now we kind of get more into... This is just kind of an overview. This was real. It was undeniable. these people were like running this country and terrorizing this country, all from the shadows. So we're going to go back a little bit further. Was somebody going to... No? Okay. Let's go back a little bit further. And we're going to talk about Roberto Calvi and kind of... This is where it gets really fucking weird, right? So shiesty, powerful elites operating in the shadows to enact their personal desires. That's nothing new.
Sounds like my bedroom.
Right, you know what I mean? It's just what happens. It's a fucking law of nature. But here's where the shit gets really interconnected with a lot of the history that we were kind of talking about before. So Banco Ambrosiano was founded in 1896 by Giuseppe Tovini, who was a devout Catholic, and he was tired of secular banks screwing over the common Italians and decided to create a bank that would operate morally, charitably, and ethically. But we all know that's bullshit. No bank can do that. So in 1947, Roberto Calvi starts working for the BA, and at the age of 26, being a workaholic, he quickly moves up the ranks, wanting to elevate Banco Ambrosiano's status to the biggest bank in Italy. But then he realized he would need powerful assistance to get through all the regulation. I mean, banks are obviously necessarily under a lot of scrutiny, and to grow a bank like that aggressively like he wanted to, he knew he was going to have to get his hands dirty.
Yeah, and you need support from certain people.
You need like kind of money that individuals don't have, like tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars. You need to go to like much bigger sources. He enlists the help of Michel Sindona. His nickname was the Shark. Sick fucking nicknames. Just everyone has a sick nickname except for us, apparently.
Dude, this guy, he was a shark.
He's savage. Yeah.
Fucking ruthless. He was so smart. Smart the way he did his business.
He is an Italian financier and international banker with connections to the mafia, and he owns several banks all over the world and used them to launder money mostly for the Gambino crime family. An unofficial mob accountant.
Yeah.
In 1968, Calvi meets with Sindona to discuss ways to use large sums of money of the banks. Basically, Banco Ambrosiano had a bunch of money that was not necessarily in use. Is that Danny in the background? Did Danny just sit down?
Friend of the show,
Did Danny just sit down? Well, hey there, bub. Didn't know you were doing He's just going to be staring at the camera awkwardly in the background the rest of the show. That's fucking awesome. Anyways, they had this money, and it was, like we could do legitimate business dealings with it, or we could do these really risky, not so legitimate dealings, but the reward is potentially way higher. So anyways, Calvi knows the bank's board of directors won't go for the ideas that he has or that Sindona suggests. So Calvi gets ultimately introduced to a number of other people, including Jelly, and is inducted into the P2 Masonic Order. And another really important figure comes into the picture whose name is Paul Marcinkus. Paul Marcinkus, whose nickname is the Gorilla. Yeah. And he's called the Gorilla because he has this massive stance. He's like 6'4", a couple 100 pounds, and he is kind of like an unofficial bodyguard to the Pope. He, in fact, saved the Pope from a stabbing attempt. So he's tight with the Pope.
We really need better nicknames.
But anyways, he gets introduced to Marcinkus, and Marcinkus is a high-ranking archbishop from Chicago. Like I said, he's close friends with the Pope, and Marcinkus was an unofficial bodyguard. I already said all that. 1971, Marcinkus and Sindona, after becoming head of the Vatican Bank, Marcinkus gets put in charge of the Vatican Bank, really out of circumstance.
Just because he saved the Pope's life.
Right. He saved
the Pope's life, and so now he's just being thrown in to the Vatican Bank because it's just a nod to him, and he has no business being there. He has no knowledge about finance, nothing. It's
I bet he could stop a bank robbery though.
Maybe. But
only if you guys got a knife. That's the only.
Yeah. He what was I getting at here? Oh, they put him in charge of this bank. He doesn't know shit about banking. He's just a classic nepotism hire. And ultimately he, puts down roots there. He eventually becomes president of the bank. And he can kind of make decisions about the Vatican's money he was in charge of it. Like, he was in charge of it, and he knew these other people who were bankers trying to do some shiesty shit. Whether he knew how dirty it was outright or not, it was just he never got prosecuted. We can kind of get into that later, but the Vatican's its own thing, so it's not subject to Italian laws.
Yeah, it's a sovereign nation.
No crime he committed that they could charge him of, because the Vatican didn't want the scandal, so they weren't going to fucking pursue it. Anyways, so they start doing these dealings with the Vatican's money and the mafia's money, Sindona, and Calvi starts opening dozens of secret offshore accounts in the Bahamas with other shell companies in Europe, and quickly turns Banco Ambrosiano into one of the most powerful banks in the world. Like, Vatican money, like lots of money, hundreds of millions, billions of dollars. Mm-hmm. 1972, Sindona, with the help of Calvi and the Mafia, buys the 18th largest bank in the U.S., Franklin National Bank, and Sindona and Calvi start aggressively investing in the U.S. Sindona famously donated $5 million to Nixon's campaign, and even owned the Watergate Hotel at the time of the Watergate scandal. So now we're talking about this group over in Italy that's actually influencing the political machinations of America. And that's, of course they were. Like, at this point, 50s, 60s, 70s, Mafia was running this country just as much as the government was running this country. And there were plenty of opportunities where our government knew that and sided with the Mafia to help Mafia's network of the underground or the shadow realm advance whatever agenda they were trying to advance. Anyways, quickly after buying the Franklin National Bank, the risky investments start to implode and the bank stock falls 80%, which sparked an SEC commission, or the SEC, to open an investigation into the institution, as well as the Italian National Bank, both confirming Sindona's involvement in a number of financial crimes. So Sindona goes into hiding, and Marcinkus also gets into hot water due to his close involvement with the two. The billions of Vatican dollars that were being managed or fraudulently, there's some fraud going on with it. So Marcinkus turns the bank's stewardship over to Calvi, and they get really tight. Calvi appoints Marcinkus to a board of one of the Bahamian banks. Anyways, he's just tight. Like, this guy's like, he's super deep.
He's living in the Bahamas, being a banker.
Avoiding prosecution. Oh my God, there's so much more. I don't even know how we're going to get through this.
Also, wasn't Sindona, when he went in hiding, wasn't that his fake kidnapping that he did?
Yes, dude. Yes. So he kidnaps himself to kind of like get sympathy from the jury,
because he's being prosecuted, and so he goes into hiding and kidnaps himself.
But basically, they find him, and over the course of time, they like kind of learn what his motive was, and he gets found guilty. But the FBI at one point received a tip that Sindona had hired a mafia hitman to kill the Italian prosecutor, and the FBI got that tip from Henry Hill, the lead character in Scorsese's classic mob flick, Goodfellas.
Probably the most famous rat ever.
But it's connected to all. It's crazy how deep and interconnected this shit is.
When I heard that Henry Hill had that information, I was just like, that's insane. I mean, that's the same thing. I was like, Henry Hill had the information that they rigged the basketball game. Like, I'm just believing it. I'm
It's
believing
because they were doing it. That's why he was watching it and no one else was going to talk about it.
Yeah.
Anyways, Sindona gets incarcerated and in prison. Somebody poisons his coffee with cyanide. Fucking dead. After Sindona's verdict, the investigation kind of turned their attention. The investigators turned their attention to Calvi, and they start uncovering all his fucking shiesty shit. And basically, Calvi was using the Vatican banks to hide where or why or how his money was moving. Since the Vatican banks were not subject to the same legal scrutiny as the other banks, like we were talking about before, it was the perfect smokescreen. Like they could do whatever the fuck they wanted, and on the outside it would be like, oh, it's a charitable work from the Vatican, but really it's like helping fund some fucking war somewhere else or like drug infrastructure. It's crazy.
Do you think that if Sedona was actually prosecuted and he didn't fake his kidnapping, that if they, made an example out of him, do you think they would have persisted with Calvi? And then in turn,
dude, absolutely. It's not even to make an example. It's really, he just knew too much. He knew too many things, and at the risk of probably even more sinister information coming out, they hedge their bets and fucking kill him. That's how this shit goes.
Right.
That's how the mafia operates. It's not because they could let people live and some people would keep their mouth, like legitimately, they'd be so terrified they'd never say anything, but it's too much of a liability. They'd just rather kill him. So they did.
I agree. Yeah, I agree. I hear that.
But, we're getting down to the very end of this anyway, so it's kind of worked out perfectly timing wise. I'm shocked. He would deposit money in the Vatican bank, then move that money to an offshore account, make investments, move those investments around until there was some kind of profit to be made, and then sell the investments on the Milan Stock Exchange. It was like pretty simple, but once they had access to the information, they found out a lot of it was just completely bypassing a lot of regulation that he should have been. So he senses the hammer coming down. He puts on a disguise, gets a fake passport, and he escapes to London. And then a week after escaping to London, he's found under the bridge. Now that bridge is interesting. The mafia sends messages. The mafia does shit intentionally to let anyone who's in the know this is what's going on, and these are the stakes that we're playing with here.
Right.
Okay, so the Blackfriars Bridge is interesting because the P2 members were known as Blackfriars. And there's a whole, like, you can watch a bunch of videos on just them discovering his body and kind of the autopsy. The prevailing thought is he's either killed somewhere else and just hung up there. Someone just brings his body up on a boat and hangs him up there. Or he was at some point alive but incapacitated enough to where they just hung him up there and gravity did the work. But he's fucking dead. During the investigation of Sindona, the investigators ultimately end up searching for Lucio Gelli. Searching Gelli's Milan apartment, they hit the pay dirt when they find thousands of incriminating documents because he kept impeccable records, and he even had a naked picture of Pope John Paul II. Like that's seriously,
that's the kicker.
Yeah, it's some real shit. And of course, in that, a complete list of P2 members. There were 3 heads of Italian intelligence agencies, the owner of the biggest newspaper in Italy, mob members, politicians, bankers, army generals, policemen. Gelli gets arrested in Switzerland trying to withdraw $50 million, just a casual $50 million withdrawal. And then somehow escapes to South America after being arrested there. And then after a few years, he turns himself in, but and this is really kind of for the train bombing. When he realizes he's going to be found guilty, he escapes again to France, but then gets caught shortly after. And I think he dies in prison. Like they capture him. He's the
one who retired.
Yeah. They put him on house arrest at his mansion, his villa in Italy. And he died there. Marcinkus was never prosecuted at all. And he basically retired in Arizona. until he died. And then many of the people, this is what's crazy. Many of the people in Italy who are in power right now were involved with P2, including the longest running prime minister of Italy.
Right. Yeah, that far right guy right now who.
This is real shit. This is real shit.
Also,
So,
I want
like,
to
before
say,
go ahead, Eric.
The who they think killed Calvi, Francisco De Carlo, and his nickname was the Strangler.
Fucking amazing.
Great. I'm just like this. Of course, they get the Strangler to come fucking hang him. Like, of course they do.
Yeah, let's clean this up.
All right, here's our list of suspects. There's the hanger,
The Strangler, the Black
Strangler,
Prince,
the shark.
the shark, the cocaine bear.
I heard something when I was listening to one of the videos. I think they arrested De Carlo, and people were talking about like, oh, like they think that Francisco De Carlo killed Calvi, and they're asking him, and he's like, it's the other Francisco De Carlo. It wasn't me.
That's hilarious. That's so Italian. That's so Italian.
It was the other guy. It wasn't me.
It's the other guy who has my exact same name.
Yeah. Took care of that thing for you.
But this is crazy. Like this is a thing. This is a thing. It's undeniable. And what before we were talking like how could something like this with so many moving parts and so many people involved, how could people keep it secret? It's happened. And it happens all the time. The Manhattan Project, that's another example. Literally, cities of people working on that shit. And nobody said anything until after they dropped the fucking bomb.
As you explain it and the body count that everything has too, it's really easy to keep something a secret when people are scared as fuck of you.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like when you're making it very obvious that you will enforce your rule with death, that'll keep people's mouths shut. Like they will not talk. They will not risk the possibility of ending up hanging from a bridge.
Yeah, and just like you said with like those little notes, basically just like a detail of the murder or whatever that would just be a red flag to certain groups or people, like that, something like that. You'd be like, okay, well, not going to do what he did because they all know what he did, right? You know,
hanging from that specific bridge with rocks in your pockets. I'm sure if any of us were in the mafia, there's some kind of actual literal interpretation what the rock in the pocket means, what hanging somebody means, and definitely being from that bridge. That's like the easiest connection in the sense that they were called Blackfriars.
It just sucks because we're going to have to wait at least 3 more generations for a movie to be made about all this when all the people who were doing all the murdering were dead. No,
seriously, a lot of this shit went down in like the late 80s. So a lot of the people who were involved in P2, they're still involved in Italian politics.
Yeah.
It's fucking crazy. But this is just one of those things where it's like everyone doesn't need to be in on the lie. Only a very small number of people.
Right.
If you have the right people, it doesn't need to be a very big circle. They can control the flow of information,
right. And everyone else is just a pawn in that game.
They're not even asking. Look, dude, our military literally trains our government trains the military to just be acting robots. Like they don't think morally about what they're doing. It's the advancement of the agenda. Right. And these people, not only being in charge of their government's military, training their military that way, they were using the access to those trained killers and the access to the information. Dude, they were just doing whatever the fuck they wanted. They were doing whatever the fuck they wanted. And it was in many ways to undermine the actual proper surface level operation of the Italian government. It's fucking crazy.
And they did it, with a perfect disguise because it's like the cloak of the Vatican is just nobody touches that.
Especially then, at that point, now like you'll get some people taking shots, but back then nobody.
How many kids of the Vatican touched and fucking no one does anything? It's like the same thing. It's
this is an interesting tangent. There's a movie on Netflix called The Vatican Girl.
Yeah, we've talked about this. I haven't watched it yet, but
it's not directly related to this, but it's kind of related because it's happening around the same time, and there's a lot of the same people that are involved in it.
It's just a secret society.
Well, it's about the disappearance of this girl, but there's a fair amount of evidence to suggest that the Vatican was in some way involved in it. And again, like this is undeniable. Like the Vatican can say whatever the fuck they want to about it. This is undeniable. It happened.
Okay. Also, I think Pope John Paul I, when I forget why someone tried to assassinate him, but then he died like 34. I think he was only Pope for like 34 days.
Yeah.
Wasn't he looking into?
He was starting to scratch the surface, and they talk about that.
Right.
In Godfather 3, they imply that because of him basically calling out the connection between the mafia and the Vatican, because of that, he was killed.
Yeah, he was killed
or something.
And then Pope John Paul II comes in. Everybody loves him, and he does not want to investigate. He chooses not to. So it's just
and it's what's fucked about him. It's not even that. What's so fucked about it is that they know some shit is going on.
Yeah, that's
either
was killed.
Either they don't care, or they just don't want the scandal, and both of those things are equally bad.
Yeah.
But
on God,
for real, bussin'. Speaking of which, I did come across this meme, and I feel like I need to share it because it's goddamned hilarious. Let me just pull this up. I find it to be like so relevant with our times. Oh, you can't read this at all. God damn.
No.
Hang on. One second here. This will be the last thing we do.
It's George W. Bush with Erik Henkelman's haircut.
I saw this the other day, and it's honestly, it may be one of the funniest things I've seen in a very long time. No cap, sir. A plane has dead ass crashed into the World Trade Center and another one into the MF Pentagon. No cap, the situation is not bussin'. Look at his hair, bro. Look at this hair.
That is some Erik Henkelman hair. I will give him that.
It's fucking hilarious.
Eric, I think you have great hair, buddy.
Oh, I know.
All right, so let's wrap this up. I know Clint's got some shit to do. Eric, I wanna throw this out to you. I want to do another episode, but I want to do it on sports conspiracies.
Okay.
We can talk afterward about when we do it, but
yeah, we could do that.
Because it didn't even click for me until we started to talk about it. You could absolutely do a whole episode on that. There's so many cool fucking stories, There's so many Aaron Hernandez, easiest one. Oh yeah, dude, that one's super fucked. Yeah, even the OJ thing, like you know a lot. You put me onto so much shit I had no idea. I thought I knew all about that, and you were putting me onto shit I had no fucking clue was actual.
Yeah, if we get, I'll deep dive into OJ.
You're obviously welcome back anytime, buddy.
Yeah, let's absolutely do this again. I know this one was mostly me screaming at you too, so it'd be nice to have you back on.
Any listeners of the show knows that every 3 or 4, we just got to let James get some stuff off his chest. So,
Clint, like really though, like what do you think about this shit,
dude? Like I think it's crazy, and like just like I was gonna say earlier, like people don't talk about it, but it's because they're like scared. And I was thinking, I was like, okay, so there's hints to it in these movies and things like that, but why aren't there movies about this? And then I thought about it for a second. I was like, oh, probably because people would get fucking death threats if they tried to expose any of this information in a way that's beyond just like an old print, like digging up an old print like magazine or like newspaper.
A very casual reference. Yeah.
So no, I think that's honestly more interesting than The Sopranos.
Yeesh. Eric's personally offended by that. He's personally offended by that.
It's okay. Clint, I might have another stroke.
Whoa! Whoa!
Oh, Eric, you definitely gotta come back because you and me are gonna. I hope you keep boxing, buddy, because you and me we're gonna throw him back. Boys, I gotta jump off.
No, let's do it. This was great, Eric. Thank you so much for coming on here. We'll jump on here. Stay on. We'll talk a little bit afterward. But thank you so much, everybody. We'll catch you next week. Thank you so much, Eric. We'll see y'all later.
Peace.
Bye bye.
This has been the Totally Legitimate Business Podcast. With your hosts, Clint G and James Oliva. Executive producers, Clint G and James Oliva. That's obnoxious. Sound design, mix, and master by James Oliva. Literally no one cares. For more Totally Legitimate Business, subscribe to our YouTube channel at Totally Legitimate Business or add us on TikTok at TLB Pod. When will this end? Thank you for listening. Now get back to work. Move it along, buddy.